Welcome everyone to the Preschool Neuroscience Summit. Today I'm really excited to have Mark Greenberg with us. Dr. Greenberg is someone that I've followed myself personally in my career for many, many years. He's the chair of prevention science at Penn State. He's the author of 350 articles and chapters on the development of well-being, learning, and the effects of prevention efforts on children and families. He's a founding member of CASEL, which many of our viewers will be excited to know, and co-founder and developer of the PATHS curriculum. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about that later on, but really excited to have him join us. He's also kindly given us all a free resource called Emotional Regulation, the Key to Human Development. So that's a video that we will share with you as well. So welcome, Mark, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Helen. Glad to be with you.
Thanks. Let's start. We're all preschool teachers. We might have some parents on the summit as well, but why are the preschool years so important for children's social and emotional development?
Well, I guess there's a lot of reasons, Helen. I could go on for hours, but I think there are sort of three major changes that are sea changes in the lives of preschoolers, and you know that they're changing so quickly. So if you're a teacher that works with 3-year-olds, you know it's quite different than working with 4- or 5-year-olds. But I think there are three big changes that are occurring in the lives of preschoolers that are related to, of course, to brain development. The first is the understanding of other people's minds. We used to call it perspective taking, and now it's often called developing a theory of mind. And I'll tell you about a little study I did in the 1970s, which ages me. I must have been only 9 years old or something when I did this study. But it's a study where we asked kids, we asked 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds questions. And we asked them questions like, if it's your mother's birthday, would your mommy want a dress or a toy truck? And universally, 3-year-olds will answer that mommy wants a toy truck.
Right.
But around 4 years of age, there's a dramatic change, and almost every 4-year-old said that their mom would like a dress. And so we asked lots of questions like this. And what it demonstrated is that children have we could call them egocentric if you want, but they have a difficulty before about age 4 taking the perspective of another person. And you see this in relationships. I was trained as an attachment theorist with Mary Ainsworth. And John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth talked about a theory of attachment where there was a new stage of attachment, which happened in the preschool years called the moving to the level of representation. They called it the goal-corrected partnership. And that means that while a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old aligns themselves with their mother through their behavior or their father or their caregiver, so that they use a secure base, and when they go too far away, they come back. And anyone who's been a parent with a child at an airport or a shopping center, the kids go away. They're looking every once in a while, and then they're cycling back again. But now something new happens. Now children not only want to align their physical proximity to their caregiver, to their attachment figure, but now they want to align perspectives. And Bowlby called that the goal-corrected partnership. So now children can be secure by carrying around their mother's plans in their head, because now they know that I have a plan and my mom has a plan or my dad has a plan, and if those plans align, then I'm okay. In the old days, we used to do what's called the strange situation, where we would separate the parent and the child in a lab. Just, mom would walk outside the room. And you would see some children begin to get upset. And then they would look in the mirror, it's a one-way mirror, and they'd start to talk to themselves. I'm okay, my mommy's coming back, I'm just gonna play. And they were using this self-language, self-talk, to help them manage this issue, so they would stay aligned with their parents in a new form of a relationship, which really is a representational level. And so that's a really important thing, that children now can understand the minds of others and they can take other people's perspectives. So that's the first one. I think the second one I just told you a bit about, which is using language for self-talk. And this is what Luria and Vygotsky, the great Russian psychologist, talked about really back in the early 1900s. And even John Dewey talked about this in the 1800s, 1890s. And that is that that children now use language not just to communicate with others. That is, we think about language as having two roles. One is to tell other people things, but the second is to talk to yourself. And you see in the preschool years, all of a sudden children began to have this ability to self-talk, to be able to use language to direct themselves. And we do it ourselves as adults. Like when we're doing something new, like when I do a new recipe, I'm going back and forth between my laptop and the parts of the recipe, and I'm talking to myself about what I need to do. Whenever we have a task that's new, we find that we'll begin to talk to ourselves as a way of regulating our behavior. And you see the children around age 4, they do that all the time. They begin to talk out loud when they're solving a task, especially if the task is moderately difficult. So now they can use language to begin to regulate themselves, to have self-control, but they also can use it to have really complicated fantasy play. And if you watch preschoolers at home or at a daycare or preschool, what you'll see is that when they do fantasy play, they'll be regulating the play by talking to themselves as they do the play. And so that's a major sea change, is this ability not only to use language for communicating with others, but really as a way of regulating our own thinking.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Yeah. I could just watch kids, doing things all day, and so it is really, really exciting to see all the development that's happening kind of in front of your eyes, and as you said, so different from 3 to 4 to 5 to notice. So, Mark, tell us about, you have a very highly cited study that shows what the impact is of social emotional skills on preschool children, and looking at forward to adult outcomes. So can you tell us a little bit about that study and what you did and what you found?
Sure. This is a study called, part of what's a very large study called the Fast Track study that has been going on for about 30 years now. And it began when we began to assess children when they were just entering school. So at the end of kindergarten, the beginning of first grade. And we followed a large number of these children, about 1,000 of them, all the way into adulthood, and we're still studying them. They're now 32, 33 years of age. And when the kids were just entering school, we had their teachers just very simply, all they did is they filled out an 8-item measure on the behavior of each child. And these were children that were in Nashville, Tennessee, rural Pennsylvania, so rural and urban, Seattle, Washington, and Durham, North Carolina. And they were meant to be representative of children in those neighborhoods and those schools. And the 8 items were really about how well they could get along with their friends, the most important thing to children, and then also how well they were able to regulate their emotions, to maintain control, to not lose it and tantrum, to be able to regulate themselves even when it was a bit difficult. And we followed these children, again, as I said, to age now till the 30s, but we published a paper recently. It was through age 25. And you might say, well, there's all kinds, if we looked at adulthood outcomes, for example, like did they graduate from high school or college, or are they on public welfare, or have they been arrested for a serious crime? You would say, well, that's a function of all kinds of background factors, like the parents' social class and economic situation in the family, the quality of the family environment, gender, because of course boys will be arrested at higher rates, and maybe even their early IQ. Children maybe with lower IQs might be more at risk. We could look at their early behavior problems, children that were having problems with their behavior. They were aggressive, for example, in the preschool years. So we looked at all those behaviors. We looked at everything we could. We looked at if their parents were teens when they had their children. We looked at race and gender, the quality of the home environment, because we visited every home, the quality of the parent-child relationship, the child's early IQ. And when we were able to control with a very complex statistical model, all of these factors, we were able to isolate what the effect is of this one teacher rating of 8 items in kindergarten for a whole plethora of outcomes across development. And what we found was that 8-item measure, a very simple measure, it would take a teacher a minute or two to complete on a child, predicted if they would graduate from high school, how many years they were in special services, special education services, how many years they had medication in their K-12 period, usually for ADHD, if they graduated from college, if they were living in public housing or using public services, and if and how often they had been arrested. Now, this may seem surprising to some people, but if you're a principal of a elementary school, these are the kids that come into your office all the time. They're sent by their teachers to the office because they've lost control. And this is not about their intelligence. It's really about their ability to regulate themselves. And that's really related to this larger topic of what we call executive functions, EF, which is a whole series of skills that fall together under this title EF that are about children's abilities to regulate themselves, to plan ahead, for example, to think about what they can do to solve a problem and generate alternatives, or how to think ahead. If you know that you do something wrong, it's likely to lead to a bad outcome, maybe you inhibit yourself. So these early skills, that executive function skills and emotion regulation skills that underlie development, are so powerful that unless we do something to help children by supporting them better, even their behavior in kindergarten is a strong predictor of what their outcomes will be like in adulthood.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, to think that, I mean, while we're working in preschools, we know that it's so important. I used to be a preschool teacher myself, and I know how much work goes into it. But I think sometimes there's not enough, praise or acknowledgement, I guess, of how important a preschool teacher can be in the life of children, and affecting some of these things that you talked about later on. And you have a book about this as well, don't you?
I do, Helen, and that's right. There's a lack of appreciation for how important teachers are in the preschool years. And what I tell teachers is they're not only teaching children how to use their language and their pre-literacy skills and how to explore, creatively play, but they're making new connections. The quality of their teaching is really helping to structure the brain. So how these midbrain structures of the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus become related to the frontal areas, the prefrontal areas of the brain. And as we know, the more connections that are made, the faster these connections are made, the more they are myelinated by habit and practice, the more likely they are to become naturally part of us. And some children, mostly due to the quality of their caregiving, both the teachers and parents, are able to make these quick connections that allow them to regulate their behavior much more easily than others.
Yeah, it's fascinating. As I said, I could just watch kindergarten students all day, or preschool students, because they're so interesting and great teachers for us, I think, as well. So, Mark, can you maybe share some practical things that parents and teachers can do that could support and improve children's social and emotional well-being?
Sure. Well, as a result of all these changes, children really can become aware of and use language to tell other people how they feel. They can try to figure out the word for emotions for others. No one knows this better than preschool teachers, because the most important thing that they say is use your words. And using your words, having children be able to put into words what their experience is the key issue I think in promoting development. Instead of, I remember my son when he was a preschooler, when he would get angry, he would look for something to throw. So we had to put all our flower pots up high because that's what he would go for. And all of a sudden, when he learned to say, I'm angry, and he'd say it and he'd pound his fist and he'd say, I'm angry, it's substituted for throwing something, or for other children, it might substitute for hurting another child. The almighty power of language to regulate behavior is really key. And it's a substitute for all these, what we would call immature behaviors. So what are the things parents can do? Well, first of all, they can model the skills that they want children to have. An example of that is being able to talk out loud when you're doing things, so that children begin to see that the nature of our minds, that we are using language all the time to regulate our behavior. A second thing is help them develop a rich vocabulary, especially of emotions. And I'm sure that many of the people that are listening are familiar with emotion theory and Lisa Feldman's work and others, showing that even in adulthood, those of us that have more developed vocabularies, more differentiated vocabularies for emotions, are more likely to be both mentally healthy and physically healthy. And that's clearly true for children. We've done a whole variety of research showing that children that have better emotion knowledge and more words for emotions, even in the preschool years or at the entrance to school, are more likely to have better social emotional competence, to be able to show more engagement in the classroom and better attention. So developing a rich vocabulary of emotions, talking about emotions, reading books about emotions, watching shows about emotions like Sesame Street or others, and then having discussions about it is really key for both parents and for teachers. I think another thing is to practice self-control with them. When children are beginning to learn these skills, like, for example, executive functions are beginning to come online with 4-year-olds, but they're not good at them yet. I mean, we as adults struggle oftentimes to have self-control, right? And we regret things we do all the time. This is not just a problem for children. As Oscar Wilde said, only the naive know themselves. And what he meant by that was, across our whole lives, we're going to be struggling with our social emotional development, and especially our emotion regulation when we're frustrated, and oftentimes most by the people we love the most. We know that we get craziest in our closest relationships, and so when we feel emotions like regret or embarrassment, it's usually due to the fact that we've done something that really, now that we have a little perspective, we've calmed down, we know wasn't effective, and we hurt someone somehow. So when children are 3 to 5 years of age, we have to sort of to help them by taking both sides of the equation. So, for example, if we're going to try to do problem solving with a child, let's say a child's done something, let's say a 4-year-old has done something where he's broken another child's toy or invaded a child in the sandbox, and the other child is upset. And we want to talk to them about it. We want to help them to solve that problem. Well, first of all, we have to all calm down, right? Because if we're not calm, we can't think straight. But then we often may have to play both sides of the equation. We may have to say, Helen, what is it? What happened? And Helen stares at me like this, like, she's glued to, I can't talk about this. And then you say, Helen, did you push Johnny because you wanted to get in the sandbox? And Helen may nod, and you say, well, Helen, what could you do? What could you do next time? And she stares at you again like she's looking right through you. And so you say, well, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do this. Which one do you think would be a good thing to try next time? And so you're sort of playing both sides of the equation, and that's what parents do with their children to help build these cognitive capacities. It's what Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, where you take the child just a little bit farther than they already are by helping them, by filling in their side at times. Just like if we want a child to calm down when they're upset, we don't just tell them to calm down, because that doesn't work very well. But if we hold their hands and we look at them and we breathe with them, we're really helping them. We're really taking a central role in this to teach them how to do this. Then they're often able to calm down. So we have to be very practical about this. We want to model the skills that we want children to have, We want to help them develop this rich vocabulary of emotions. And we want to do things that really help develop these executive functions by oftentimes helping to fill in the part they can't quite do by themselves yet.
Yeah, I love that. The giving the different options and kind of, as you said, using the zone of proximal development to help them get those little hints, I guess, of what they might just be on the cusp of being able to do. Yeah, I love all of those very practical activities that you shared. And what can you tell us a little bit? I know you've, as I mentioned at the beginning, you've done literally hundreds of studies and articles and books, and you have such an extensive knowledge of preschooler social emotional development. So you use that, I think, to create the PATHS program, so the PATHS curriculum. So could you tell us a little bit about what the curriculum is and what findings you found in your research that you included in the curriculum?
Sure. So the PATHS curriculum is a social emotional learning program. It's the most studied program in the world. It's been very carefully studied, not by myself, but just by many people, lots of independent research studies. And it was developed by my colleague Carol Couchet, Celine Dimitrovich, and Rebecca Cortez. The four of us developed the preschool version of PATHS. PATHS goes from pre-K, preschool, all the way through grade 6. But doing this in the preschool years is different than doing it in second or third grade. Just like if we were teaching reading or pre-literacy skills, it'd be very different in kindergarten or preschool than they would be in third grade. And so it's the same thing with social emotional development. And as you would guess from what I've said, we really focus on a number of skills. The first skill we focus on is self-control. Because if you can't calm down when you're upset, then you can't use your other skills. And as you know, preschoolers are very emotionally, we call it labile. That is, they can go from just totally upset to happy within seconds, and the opposite. And so when children become very upset, if we can't help them first to calm down when they're upset, then it's unlikely we're going to be able to have a reasonable discussion with them about what happened, what they could do next time, etc. And so we adapted a technique called the turtle technique. And this we did in the 1980s. So PATHS has been around for quite a long time. And in that technique, kids learn about a story about a little turtle who has lots of problems with his friends. He wants to be friends with everybody, but he gets upset, he loses it, and then after a while, no one wants to play with him anymore, and he feels lonely and sad. And then he meets the wise old turtle that lives on the edge of the town. And the wise old turtle tells him that he has the answer to his problem right inside himself. He has a shell. And when he's upset or he's too excited, he can go inside his shell and take deep breaths and calm down. And when he's calmer, he can come out of his shell and really solve his problem. And so we teach children literally to do what we call do turtle. And if I could show you, it's like this. Where kids are actually doing like a turtle. And
right.
Of course, when you're doing this, Helen, you can't do much else.
Right.
You can't hurt yourself. You can't throw anything.
Yeah.
In fact, kids, it's even hard to stand up when they're doing this because of their balance.
Right.
And when we began a lot of this work, we began it with deaf children. And so when my original work with PATHS was with deaf kids, and for them, we would have them sign turtle. This is the sign for turtle coming out of the shell. But the idea here is to do three things. One is to stop. The second is to do something with your body that helps you to regulate, which is both the arms and breathing. And then the third is to put this into words. So we say that you stop and calm down and tell yourself what the problem is or how you're feeling. And so we tell the story. We practice this over and over again. We reinforce children for reminding their friends to do it. So there's some peer reinforcement for it also. Of course, we send this information home to parents and explain to them how they can do turtle with their children, because we have to calm down a lot of times, don't we?
Exactly.
In fact,
I'm sure the kids are telling the parents, do the turtle. Yeah.
I've had parents that have called me up or written to me and said that we were having an argument in the car, my husband and I, and my child got in between us and had us both be turtle. Right? More and more aware of becoming out of control in their emotions, and that they can regulate themselves. So that's the first thing we do. It's very important is to teaching kids ways to do self-control. And of course, as we get older, we have different ways. We can count to 10 backwards. We can take a walk. We can go into a huddle with ourselves, if you want to think about a football metaphor. There's lots of ways that we can teach children as they get older. But we teach them just this one way at the beginning. The second thing we do is we spend a lot of time on their emotional vocabulary, as you would guess. And we have what we call feeling faces, which are visual representations, small cards that are color-coded, either yellow or blue, being comfortable or uncomfortable, because all feelings are okay. We don't talk about them as good or bad. And they use these feeling cards. So if I saw you, Helen, and you were by yourself and not looking very sad, maybe you're looking a little sullen, I would say, Helen, how are you feeling? Can you show me your feeling card for how you're feeling right now? And the idea is to bring out this activity of regulating of activating the frontal lobe. As they look through the cards and they see happy, sad, tired, scared, etc., and their vocabulary grows until they have about 50 of these cards. This activates their frontal area. It begins to put them in a place where they become calmer and they're able to talk about how they feel. So that's the second thing. Lots and lots of stories, lots and lots of activities that help children to both verbalize emotions, also understand that emotions are not just in the face, but they're in the body, and that we can try to estimate or guess how other people feel. We can't know unless we ask them, but we can guess pretty well oftentimes. And so this whole idea of emotion knowledge and emotion regulation is really, we think, the gold. And it's the gold in development. It's the central issue in development, because when you can regulate your emotions effectively, you can engage in learning, you can maintain relationships more effectively. And we know that's even true in adulthood. And that's what that study that predicted from kindergarten to adulthood showed, is that kids who could get along with others and regulate their emotions are going to do well in life. They may or may not graduate from high school or college, but they're going to be people that are able to get along with others, to engage in work and love. And that's what's important here. So that's the second thing, is a rich vocabulary of emotions. And then lastly, we're teaching children problem-solving skills, starting very simply with what we call the control signals poster, which is a red, yellow, green light. As a metaphor, everything always being very visual. We teach kids that what Turtle does is he goes to the red light and calms down, and then he can think, what can I do? And we teach children how to generate alternatives, and as they get older, how to think about the consequences, how to set goals, how to consider the potential consequences, how to make a plan, and of course, most importantly, what to do when your plan fails. Because as we know in life, most of the time, the plan that we most want to have work fails. We almost never get exactly what we want, right? And that's what we see with children that often have difficulties with both teachers and with kids, is that they have one really good plan, and when they try it, they can become so frustrated at the plan failing that now they do something that really is hurtful or revengeful. And so it's, again, what's the problem? It's the problem of emotion regulation. It's when a failure happens, or when you don't get what you want, or you feel really dissatisfied, what can you do to recoup, to take some deep breaths, to say, I can handle this situation, let me think of another idea. And that's the process that we engage with kids. And then lastly, we help children be compassionate. It's very important that they become compassionate towards others. So the fourth thing we do is we spend a lot of time on helping them to understand why other people may feel differently than them, why people are in different circumstances in the world, how we're more similar than we are different, and how to develop a compassionate stance towards others. And we can do that even with 4-year-olds.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of compassionate classrooms for sure. Well, what wonderful work, and lots of wonderful steps inside of that program that must be helping. It's very global, of heard about it being run all over the world. Do you know how many countries it's being used in? Or
I think about 25 or 30 countries. We don't exactly know how many. And there have been a series of randomized trials by us, but also by others, showing that PAS is likely to improve children's ability to get along with others, their ability to engage in the classroom, and their ability to develop these executive function skills.
Yeah.
So even though what they're learning is to regulate their emotions and talk about their feelings, we're not teaching them the cognitive tasks. They actually improve significantly compared to matched children on these executive function tasks, even the ones that are paper and pencil tasks, their working memory or their ability to inhibit themselves, so that we don't learn how to be successful in life with paper and pencil tests. We learn it in the world, and then hopefully sometimes it transfers over.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the summit today and sharing all this really interesting, informative information and the really practical steps we can take as parents and preschool teachers as well. I just want to remind everyone, we'll have the link to the book, the Fast Track Program for Children at Risk, and to all Mark's website and social media, as well as that video on emotional regulation that's on YouTube that you can check out and get more information about the work that he's doing. But thank you once again for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Great to be with you, Helen. Be well.
Thanks.